Hello, Rob here from the Flanagan Homestead. If you've been cutting firewood for over 30 years like I have, I'm sure that you've had your saw bind up in a log before and have a hard time getting it out. And when I'm out in the middle of the woods that I've been hiking down and I don't have tools at my disposal, it's quite hard to get my saw out. So here's a couple tips on how to easily get your bar out of the log. And best way to do it is to not get bound up. Obviously this log right here I set up so where it's support on one end and the opposite end, and it's hovering in the air, so it's obviously going to bind. But when you're out on the hillside and the slope is not even, sometimes you have a log laying down and you think it's going to go one way and it goes the other way. So you need to, number one, you learn which way it's going to want to go, and number two, you need to have ways to get yourself out of there. And number three, if you're not sure, kind of keep an eye on it, and if you feel it's starting to bind, get out of there quick before it gets in there. But first trick is you could use your falling wedges. Now if I'm going to cut down on the top of this log and I'm not sure which way it's going to go, I am in this scenario, but if I'm not sure in the woods, as I as my bar goes through and I create a curve, I can stick my wedge in, so if it does want to try to bind up, the wedge will keep it separated and my saw will continue to go through. So let's take a look at that. Now this is a light log, so it's not going to push down real hard, but I can take my wedge, put that top, find a rock or log or whatever and tap that in. And this would normally bind up traditionally, but because I had my wedge in there, I was able to go all the way through and it didn't bind up. And I'm not suggesting intentionally use the wedge to keep it from binding. Well, I am, but what I'm saying is don't go the direction that you believe is going to bind and just stick a wedge in there. This is if you're not sure, stick the wedge in there and then you'll keep it from binding. If I had seen this log in the woods and I really wanted to cut through it, I would have just come up from the bottom and it would have dropped in half anyway. But using your wedge keeps it from binding. This log would have definitely bound together had I not had the wedge in there. Okay, I've set up another log for demonstration purposes. Let's go ahead and get my saw stuck. Okay, full disclosure, this log is skinny enough that I could just lift it, put enough pressure on it to open the gap and the saw would just fall right out. But let's pretend that this is a bigger log or it had a wider span, so it created a very significant pinch, so you couldn't do that. Okay, so all I have to have is my chainsaw tool and a new spare bar and chain. Many of you, if you've been running a saw for quite some time, have an extra bar and chain when you put a new one on. And full disclosure, it was time for me to get a brand new bar. I haven't got one in a long time, and new chain. So I said, well, might as well make a video while I'm doing it. But anyway, I can keep my old bar. I have some other old bars as well and chains in my pickup. So if I'm out working and I get bound up to the point that I cannot get the saw out, okay, you're just going to simply take your bar off, you have to be careful taking these off out in the woods because the nuts want to disappear. Okay, so now my saw motor is free, and all I have to do is simply put on my new chain and my new bar, and we're all good. we're good to go, and I can free this up knowing which way this saw is going to break. Once you got your new bar and chain on, you know it's going to bind this way, so you're just going to go the other direction to free your saw up. Nothing like a new bar and chain. While I've got you here talking firewood, here's my measuring stick that I use to cut my firewood. And you might say, do you need to measure it? I like to be somewhat consistent. Usually after several cuts, I can just visualize it pretty well. But my wife wants 14-inch long logs instead of 16 inches because they're easier to fit in and they're easier for her to handle. And so I've cut sticks to that length and put it on top of the log before and used it, but a stick that length disappears into the wood pile and you can't see it. This is a 16-inch piece of PVC. It's 1 1/4 inch PVC. I cut it in half, and the reason I like this, one, it shows up, two, I cut it to 16 inches. I put a 14-inch mark and a 12-inch mark here as well, but when I cut it in half, the nice thing is when I could set it on top of the log so that it's beveled so that it sits and kind of grabs the log and it's not going to roll off, whereas a stick might. So I could very simply take the 14-inch mark, put it right on the edge of the log. This is not going to fall off, and then I can go ahead and start my cut. Well, there you have it. One tip to keep you from getting stuck using the wedges. One tip on how to get it out using a new bar and chain if you are stuck. But the best thing is to learn to read your logs so you're not going to bind up. Thanks for joining me on the Flanagan Homestead, where Christmas trees are my business, teaching and cleaning horticulture is my job, and outdoor projects like cutting firewood are my passion. Hope to see you again soon. Be blessed, everyone.